A cylinder seal turns across damp clay. Without that motion, the grain cart waiting outside the gate cannot move another step. It is the year 480, before the Common Era. At Persepolis, new columns are still rising while Xerxes carries Persian power toward the Aegean. The king may stand thousands of miles from this terrace, yet guards, scribes, and storerooms keep him present in every doorway. Is Persepolis a living city or a ceremonial stage built to perform an empire? Across 7 days, the climb passes through the gate of all nations, the Apadana, dust-filled construction yards, guarded royal corridors, and water channels cut beneath the stone. By the final night, one small tablet will show who truly keeps the King of Kings looking eternal. By this year, the Achaemenid Empire stretched across many lands, languages, and peoples. Xerxes was in the 6th year of his reign, and his campaign into Greece would fix his name to war for much of Western memory. But in the Persian heartland, his authority was also being built from stone, clay, wood, metal, and grain. Persepolis stood on a terrace, part natural rise, part human construction, looking out over the Mavdash plain. It was not the empire's only capital, and it was not an ordinary city either. Above, the terrace held ceremonial halls, a treasury, royal residences, gates, and guarded quarters. Below, roads, settlements, workshops, and supply lines connected the terrace to the wider region. There was no single crowd who could simply be called Persians. Officials, soldiers, artisans, porters, messengers, and laborers from many communities experienced this place in very different ways. Some were led toward the Great Hall. Some stopped at the storerooms. Some saw only a gate from the outside and went no further. On the western stairway, the first light was already touching the stone. The terrace was waking before the king. Dawn touches the stairway before the first person is allowed to climb it. From the plain below, Persepolis does not appear as one continuous city. It rises instead as an artificial horizon, terrace walls catching the light, tall columns still being set into place, a gate framed by scaffolding and dust, and figures and animals reduced to small moving shapes beneath it all. Even at this hour, the construction site has not slept. Workers haul timber, shift blocks of stone, level fresh ground, and carry materials towards sections that are new. Sections still in use, and sections still wrapped in scaffolding. This is not the finished monument later centuries would imagine. It is a working capital being built in real time. At the base of the great stairway, the pace of every body changes. The steps are low and wide, built in a rhythm that forces long robes, careful feet, and led animals to slow into something more deliberate, more dignified. The stone at the edge of each step has already been worn smooth by that same measured climb. Above the stairway stands the gate raised under Xerxes, guarded by great stone bulls and winged protective figures. Its inscriptions declaring that this king continued the work his father had begun. Beyond the gate, no two people are permitted to see Persepolis in the same way. An official is waved toward the main approach. A messenger stops to present a sealed document. A porter is redirected toward the storerooms and service passages. A builder turns back to the worksite he came from. A guard studies clothing, goods, and the person leading each group before allowing anyone to pass. None of this requires confrontation. Order here moves through small, practiced gestures. Once through the gate, the terrace does not reveal itself all at once, the way a modern ruin might. Walls, corridors, active construction, and narrow passages create layers of hidden and half-hidden space, so that Persepolis only opens gradually, one permission at a time. A gate named for all the empire's nations does not mean every person entering it holds the same right to move through what lies beyond. Near the top of the stairway, one procession, carrying rank and status, turns toward the Apadana. Another, carrying goods and provisions, turns away into a different passage. The camera lingers not on either group, but on the line between them. Before an empire can be ruled, it must first be arranged into an image. On the Apadana stairway, no one runs, no one resists, and no procession breaks formation. A living procession crosses the steps this morning, and beside it, carved processions move in the same direction they have moved for centuries. The camera keeps returning to the same pairing, a real foot beside a carved foot, a real vessel beside a carved one. Clothing, headwear, hairstyles, footwear, animals, and objects still mark each community as distinct. Nothing here has been erased, but every difference has been placed inside a single system. All the figures move the same direction, at the same measured pace. None fight, none resist, all advance toward the same center. The Apadana stairway is famous for its rows of delegations, drawn from across the empire, and identified through their dress and the goods they carry. Some figures are led by a Persian or Median guide, a hand resting on a wrist or shoulder. That gesture might mean guidance. It might mean formal reception. It might mean control, or a symbol of cooperation under royal order. No single reading should be treated as the certain truth. Animals, cloth, and metal vessels function here as a kind of political speech. No one on this wall speaks a word. The objects alone declare that a distant land exists, that it produces something worth carrying, and that it has now entered the king's space. Unlike much triumphal art from the ancient world, these figures are not shown as bound captives or trampled enemies. Domination is presented instead as willing order, a political image, not proof that this empire ruled without violence anywhere. The carvings appear stone-colored today, but surviving traces of pigment suggest that many of these surfaces were once painted. Any color must be restored with restraint, never turned into invention or fantasy. Eventually, the camera leaves the flawless procession on the wall and follows one real container instead. It is set down, inspected, and recorded, and then carried off through another passage. The image of empire is beginning to turn into paperwork. An empire does not erase the identities of the lands it rules. It folds them into a formation, arranged around its own center. On stone, the empire makes no sound. In the storeroom, it has already begun to be counted. The most important decision of the morning is not carved into stone. It is pressed into a piece of clay small enough to fit inside one hand. A scribe prepares that clay, and the message inside does not need to be spoken aloud like dialogue. It simply records who is involved, which group they belong to, what they are owed, where they must collect it, and under whose authority the order was given. Much of this correspondence was written in Elamite, one part of a wider system that used several languages at once. This empire never needed everyone to speak a single tongue in order to be governed. It needed scribes who could turn any order into a form the bureaucracy could read and verify. A pressed seal is never mere decoration here. It binds a transaction to the official who issued it, the officer responsible for it, the supplier who filled it, and the person who received it. Seals found across the fortification and treasury tablets offer rich evidence of just how much administrative activity this system handled. A messenger leaves Persepolis carrying documents already sealed shut. At stations along the route, these determine exactly how much food that traveler is owed. This is not a modern passport. It is proof of a right to draw rations along an approved road. At each stop, a portion of food is measured out, and both supplier and recipient leave their own confirming marks. That record eventually finds its way back to the center, to be checked against everything else. Records from the treasury. whose years overlap directly with this one, describe payments made partly in silver and partly in rations to stoneworkers, carpenters, metalworkers, herders, and other laborers at Persepolis and across the surrounding region. One such payment record is carried out toward the worksite. This is not presented as the exact tablet issued on this particular morning, only as a fair illustration of a system that clearly did operate this way. Persepolis does not end at the wall of its terrace. Every time a sealed document leaves and eventually returns, the road, the ration station, and a distant settlement all become, in their own way, part of the center. The palace appears in the ledgers long before the final block of stone is ever lifted into place. Stone does not lift itself, yet the names of the people who lifted it were almost never carved into it. A stone component begins to move under a coordinated group, rope holders, wood wedgers, someone watching the angle, someone giving the signal, and others pulling in rhythm. Nothing here is staged as a single body's feat of strength. The work depends entirely on a shared, collective pace. Treasury records mention stoneworkers, carpenters, metalworkers, herders, and many other trades operating at once. And some of these artisans came from regions well beyond the Persian heartland, evidence of a court mobilizing skill on an imperial scale. A block of local stone might pass through many hands before it is finished. Fine imported wood, metal fittings, applied color, construction techniques, and decorative patterns shaped by more than one tradition. Persepolis is not a copy of a single culture. It is a court style deliberately assembled from many. The camera then shifts away from public reliefs, which are almost entirely male, toward clay tablets that record working women instead. These administrative records offer direct evidence of women drawing rations, women organized into labor groups, and in some cases, women leading those groups outright, with allowances that varied by skill and rank. In certain skilled trades, women and men appear to have received equal rations, while unskilled labor shows a clearer gap between them. None of this should be smoothed into a modern story of equality before the mechanism itself is shown plainly. The system remained hierarchical throughout. Rations could differ by gender, skill, position, age, and even a woman's stage of childbearing, along with her standing inside her own group. The workforce, too, was never a single mass that can simply be called enslaved. These groups likely included dependent laborers, specialized artisans, people displaced from elsewhere, employees of the royal household, workers paid entirely in rations, and others paid partly in silver. The precise legal standing of every group is not always something the surviving evidence can settle. As the light turns toward late afternoon, the people who built this royal space put away their tools. They walk toward a corridor and turn aside into the service quarter. A door leading further in remains under guard, and beyond it, someone else is already preparing a space its builders will likely never enter. The hands that raised the throne were not the hands permitted to touch it. The throne does not need anyone sitting on it for the entire room to stay silent. Servants move through the space first, cleaning the floor, shifting vessels, checking furnishings, arranging objects, and stepping carefully out of the main path. None of this claims that a specific audience is certainly about to take place. It is simply the work of keeping the palace ready at any moment it might be needed. Guards and officials hold fixed positions nearby, and their bodies form lines that cannot be crossed, backs that cannot turn, postures that cannot relax into sitting or drift any closer to the center. Carved stone architecture is extended here by human formation. Royal reliefs and symbols show the king enthroned, holding a scepter, carrying a lotus, with a crown prince, officials, and armed escorts arranged behind him. These images offer real evidence of how the court wished an audience to be seen, though they cannot prove that every ceremony unfolded exactly this way in practice. Inscriptions of Xerxes are cut into the walls, declaring that his authority comes from Ahura Mazda, that this construction belongs to him, and that he continues the work his father began. No one standing in this space needs to see Xerxes in the flesh. His name and image already live on the wall, the gate, and the seal. Palace reliefs also show servants carrying food, drink, and animals into these courtly spaces, images that may relate to feasting or other palace activity, though their exact function deserves careful, cautious framing rather than certainty. The camera turns toward the king's position, but does not show him there. Instead, an official bows toward his symbol. Guards hold their ground. A servant pauses at a threshold, and a sealed order is carried out of the room. The empty center becomes the space's true subject. The king never personally weighs grain, locks a storeroom, checks a travel document, guards a gate, supervises a craftsman, or records a single ration. And yet every one of those actions is carried out in the name of his order. This is the mechanism that allows power to keep functioning, while its ruler is very far away. Power at Persepolis was never held entirely inside one body. It is dispersed instead into standing positions, distances, seals, routes, titles, doors, and images carved into stone. The king may be very far away, but no door here forgets him. Beneath a place performing immortality, rainwater still has to find a way out. The camera leaves the palace behind and follows a channel of water through cut grooves, narrow passages, and technical shafts sunk into the rock. Archaeological work beneath this terrace has uncovered an entire system of drainage and hidden channels running under everything above. Blocked water is an enemy that carries no weapon, yet it can damage foundations, brick walls, storerooms, and the very walkways people cross without a second thought. No fictional flood needs to be staged here. The constant risk and the constant maintenance it demands is enough on its own. Workers move through this low, dark world clearing sediment, checking channels, carrying oil lamps, and replacing worn material by hand. They keep the palace standing, yet none of them appear in a single carved relief above. From here, the path leads toward rooms with far more restricted access. The treasury should never be imagined as a fantasy cave heaped with gold. It more likely held objects, raw metal, materials, equipment, records, and administrative space of its own. Somewhere inside it, the seal from the opening scene is checked once more, and the voiceover finally draws its threads together. A worker, a number of days, an occupation, a ration, a payment. The records that survive show these rations were never equal. The differences reflect position, skill, gender, rank, the purpose of a journey, and a person's place within the wider machine. No scene of punishment is required to make this point. The inequality is already sitting quietly inside the numbers themselves. Every system carries a weak point somewhere. A shipment runs late. A seal goes missing. A water channel needs urgent repair. A labor group has not yet received its full allowance. None of this claims that such incidents actually occurred during this particular week. These are simply the conditions any system like this must keep managing in order to keep functioning at all. The deepest darkness at Persepolis may not be violence hidden in some sealed vault. It may simply be the fact that an entire society could be ranked, day after day, by how much food each person was permitted to receive. Persepolis was raised from stone, but it lived on something far more fragile than stone could ever be. When the sun touches the Apadana, 3 processions begin moving without ever seeing one another. Along the great stairway, a delegation of officials climbs in formation. Their clothing and the objects they carry echoing the figures already standing in stone beside them. This is the stage the empire wanted seen. At the very same moment, porters push grain and heavy containers through a service passage below, unseen by anyone gathered in the great hall above. This is the system that feeds the stage. And in a small room nearby, a scribe checks a seal pressed into a fresh tablet, deciding in a few quiet seconds whether a transaction will be accepted into the record. This is the system that lets the stage be verified. The camera cuts between an object carved into the wall, that same kind of object sitting in a storeroom, and its symbol pressed into clay, three versions of the same empire, moving at once. The answer to what this place truly is arrives now through image rather than explanation. The Apadana and its gate prove that Persepolis is a stage. The storerooms, the records, the labor, and the plain beyond prove that it is alive. It was never quite an ordinary city, and never merely an empty stage that woke only for a single festival each year. It was a royal center where administration, ceremony, labor, and treasury combined to produce the empire's presence, wherever its king happened to be standing. Xerxes may be on this terrace this hour, or many days away. The illustration does not decide for him. Either way, the system keeps allocating, guarding, building, transporting, storing, and recording, because his authority exists, through thousands of small actions repeated correctly, day after day. Stone remembers certain people well: the king, the crown prince, soldiers, nobles, the delegations, the symbols of distant lands. Clay remembers others: the women who led labor groups, the messengers, the storekeepers, the artisans, entering history through nothing more than a single recorded transaction. This terrace did not stop growing after this year. Later kings continued building and using it for generations. About a century and a half afterward, the armies of Alexander took the site and burned much of what stood on it, an ending that belongs to a later chapter, not a fate already written into this one. As night finally settles over the terrace, small points of light remain lit in the storerooms, the scribes' chambers, the residences, and the workshops. The wider terrace sinks into shadow, but the sound of work has not stopped. The tablet from the opening scene is set down at last. Behind it, someone whose name will never be known reaches for the next one. Stone kept the image this empire wanted the world to see. Clay kept the people this empire needed in order to keep existing at all. The seal has stopped turning, but its mark remains pressed into the clay. Tall columns speak of kings. Small tablets speak of porters, scribes, and laborers who left no names behind. Persepolis was never only the empire's stage. It was the place where thousands of hands kept that stage alive, long after any king had already gone.